There's a couple of things. I'm going to touch on them, and you let me know which one you want me to delve more deeply into. But you're quite right. Gramsci represents a mutation of Marxism. Marx wrote in the Theory of Feuerbach in 1845 that man's nature was not fixed. There were some aspects of it, actually. Marx believed that some aspects were fixed, but he also wrote in thesis in Feuerbach that human nature was also a reflection of human relations. And Gramsci takes that and puts it on steroids, and about 70 years later in the 1920s, and he writes, this is the most satisfactory answer. In fact, human nature is not fixed at all, but it's a result of human relations. And it's this idea that then, at first you don't think, well, that's interesting, but then when you think harder about it, you realize that what it does is it's a denial of truth. And we were talking about earlier that what separates us is not really left and right, but is a belief in truth, that truth exists, real truth, undeniable truth, eternal truth, and on the other side are the constructionists, people who believe that our worldview constructs truth, that there's no truth, but except that it's constructed by our worldview, our conceptual superstructure, or in Gramsci's own term, the hegemonic narrative. Now, Gramsci was an Italian communist, the founder of Italy's Communist Party in 1921, and he had been a doer. He had been a man who joined the Council Revolution of the Biennio Rosso. The Biennio Rosso was something that took place in Italy between 1919 and 1920, a system of huge industrial strikes, I believe 16,000 in northern Italy, and then in the south you had masses of peasants occupying farmland. And he had really tried to create an Italian Soviet, but that failed. At the end of the day, the Italian Socialist Party, of which he was a member, decided not to go for revolution, not to follow what the Russians had done a year earlier in 1917, or 2 years earlier in Russia, and overthrow society. And Gramsci, and because the workers and the peasants, they had the Italian Social, in Gramsci's view, the Italian Socialist Party had not sufficiently indoctrinated the workers and the peasants. They did not have revolutionary consciousness. They had false consciousness. In other words, Marx had said in the manifesto that the family should be abolished, that private property should be abolished, or most of it taken over, and that the state should be abolished. And earlier, before the manifesto, he said God, religion is the opiate of the people. But Marx never met workers and peasants. He stayed his whole life inside the library of the British Library in London doing research or hanging out with Friedrich Engels, who was a millionaire. Or he met with revolutionaries in Paris and Brussels and so forth. Gramsci did. He attended council meetings. And Gramsci said, wait a second, the Italian peasant and worker actually loves his wife and children. He likes what little property he has. He is actually patriotic, probably not as an Italian because Italy had just been created, but of his region, patriotic of his region, and he was faithful to God. So all these things, Gramsci said, had to be deconstructed, we had to indoctrinate the workers. And I'll leave it there and you ask me whatever questions you have. The trinity with the identity politics is that much later on in the U.S. context, so they actually give up on the American worker. And we can talk about Herbert Marcuse and all that. And Herbert Marcuse, a German philosopher who belongs to this very similar views to Gramsci, sees African Americans rioting and reminds him of the riots he had seen in Germany after the war in 1918, except that also failed, just like the Italian Revolution failed. And he said, and these are his words, the ghetto population, he says the word the ghetto population, is going to lead the revolt. It's the people of other races and other colors, again, his words, that are going to lead the revolution. And for that, a whole new creation, new groups of people must be created that are non-white and are new categories in order to lead this revolution.